Hello everyone, and thank you for listening to my talk about precise multimodal in-hand pose estimation using low-precision sensors for robotic assembly. Let me summarize what this research project is about and what to expect from this talk. We are trying to determine the pose of objects after they are grasped, using simple, reliable methods and common everyday sensors. All you need for our method here is a collision or force sensor and the object and environment geometry. Why do we need to do this? In our application, which is industrial assembly, we want to know the position of the grasped object with high precision. Because when a grasp or position estimate is off by just a little bit, the task can fail completely, as you can see in the video on the right. On the left, you can see how this sort of error can happen. For example, when your vision system has noise, or made a bad guess, or the robot is a bit imprecise, or the object moved during grasping. This sort of noise and uncertainty is everywhere, especially when you want to use low-cost robots like we do. So this is why we want to confirm the position of grasped objects after grasping. Currently, the most popular solution for this problem is to design a special jig for each part. These jigs position the parts relative to the robot so that you can then teach in the robot motion. This approach works really well for high speeds and small numbers of parts, but it's much too expensive when we don't want to make thousands of the same part, or when we have many different parts. We really want to have robots with more autonomy than this, that can work with parts without having to do all of this special engineering. One goal that we have is to assemble machine parts like this. This is the task from the World Robot Summit Assembly Challenge, and it should be clear at first sight that making a jig for all of these parts is not feasible. Now, how do you get the in-hand pose of an object? After grasping the object, the uncertainty is high, like on the left. How can we reduce this? We propose to use actions like touching and looking to extract information about the grasp and make the object pose estimate more certain. With every action, we improve our estimate bit by bit, and we reduce the uncertainty. In this way, we end up with a high precision pose estimate. The limit here is the positioning accuracy of the robot itself. You can see that we have different actions to choose from, either touch or look. In the touch action, we touch a part of the environment with the object that we grasped, and in the look action, we hold it in front of a camera. We represent the belief about the object location as a probability distribution, which we store as a pose defined in the gripper frame plus a covariance matrix. And this should be obvious, but the lower the covariance becomes, the smaller this distribution is, and thus the lower the uncertainty. Smaller covariance means a better pose estimate. Every time we execute one of these actions, we improve the pose belief by reducing the covariance in some way. To update this distribution, we sample from the distribution a cloud of particles, and compare each particle with the observation to estimate its likelihood. Finally, we calculate a new distribution from the remaining or the newly weighted particles. So, let's look more closely at how each of these actions work. In the touch action, the robot slowly approaches a part of the environment, like a surface or an edge, until the force sensor detects a contact. When it does, we know that the grasped object is in contact with the environment, so we discard all of the particles which are either too far away from that environment body or too deep inside of it in collision. The assumption here is that we know the environment, but since the robot can just touch the environment to confirm the position, this is a fine assumption. In the look action, we move the gripper and the object in front of a camera. Then we compare the position of each projected particle with the binarized camera image using the IOU, the intersection of union, as a similarity score, and weigh the particles. One issue that we found is that the results here depend heavily on the initial camera calibration. These errors affect the result a lot, and maintaining a good sub-millimeter calibration accuracy is challenging without having a subject expert on site, which we can't depend on. To simplify this problem, we choose a different approach. We place a reference object in the scene in view of the camera. This reference object is seen in the same image as the object, so that all of the images contain calibration information, and the camera image can be adjusted if required. In the experiment, this looks like this. The camera looks at the object and the gripper from the left, and the reference object is seen in the bottom of the camera view. It's those 3 pins. Then we use P3P calibration to confirm the camera's extrinsic calibration. The charm here is that calibrating this reference object does not require any special tools or algorithms. The user only needs to move the robot gripper to the reference points, and that's extremely easy. And like we mentioned, for the touch action, calibration is even easier, as it just involves touching the surface or an edge. To evaluate the precision of our method, we tested it with 3 different objects and 4 different grasp orientations and depths. On the left you can see those orientations and depths at which we grasped each object, and on the right you can see the types of objects that we used. All of them are part of the World Robot Summit Assembly Challenge set to represent industrial assembly problems. We wanted to compare the precision for different grasp poses, objects, number of particles, and the order of the actions. To answer the questions, does the look action alone suffice? Does it help to use both of the multimodal actions? What are the correct settings? And to summarize those results really quickly, the number of particles does not need to be very high. 1,000 roundabout is usually enough. The order of operations does matter, the order of actions. The look action alone does not give enough accuracy with our calibration and the low resolution camera that we're using, and looking first and touching seconds gives the best results. All of the different objects and grasp poses could be located with good accuracy and no major problems. But there were some difficulties, and we'll discuss these in the next slide. One problem that we found is that different parts of the object are more or less sensitive to rotation, because the center of rotation of the object is fixed. One way to fix that is to introduce an offset to move the center of rotation to another point on the mesh. There's no problem with doing it this way, we just didn't implement it in this fashion. Another problem is unstable orientations, where the remaining particles may cluster around 2 different equally likely alternatives, but which cannot be presented by the covariance matrix. For example, if a peg can be oriented both one way or the other, back and forth, or if a peg could be in 2 different holes. Taking the mean of that results in nothing useful. In our test cases this has not been an issue, but if it was, other types of distributions would be helpful. Finally, at the moment we use individual particles to evaluate the effect of each action, but it would be much more efficient if the actions could apply directly to the probability distributions without having to sample particles. This is part of future work. In conclusion, we presented a framework to determine the post-grasp pose of an object with high precision, easy calibration, and off-the-shelf sensors. This method allows the use of both touch and look actions inside the same framework. We show that look actions are faster, but touch actions are more precise, and combining them helps speed up the process. In future work, we want to use actions that use the environment and extrinsic manipulation to reduce the uncertainty on the object. We also plan to determine the optimal action and manipulation sequence to ensure a position of an object. And last, we really want to release this code for this package to make everyone's life easier. Thank you for listening.